Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals. Chapter 34, by Mark and James Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 34. What now? Plato asked. The first test will begin immediately. The participants will compete in the order of their reveal. Quion instructed. Plato, the tree of faith has chosen you to complete. The warriors led them out of the main arena and into another, smaller area. This one contained a large pit filled with water, roughly 40 meters wide, with a 5-meter square pontoon in the center. On the pontoon sat what looked like a small chicken egg, black in color. At first, Plato had trouble understanding the purpose of the water-filled pit. Then his blood went cold when he saw it ripple, and the telltale sign of a scaled tail broke the surface. "It's a crocodile," Bion blurted out. "You can't be serious. That's hideous. You can't expect him to go in there. You're monsters." The others in Plato's team also started to protest as Plato tried to comfort Bion. "Bion, guys, please, it's okay. I'll be fine." Plato attempted to calm them. "What exactly do you expect him to do?" Luther asked. "He will be lowered into the water. For him to complete the task, he needs to retrieve the egg in the center and return it undamaged," Quion said. "And all he has to do is avoid the crocodile in the water," Nat muttered. "Crocodiles," Quion corrected. They all stared back into the pit, and after a minute they were able to see the movements of 3 oversized crocodiles, their skin an alabaster white. Plato assumed from their lack of exposure to daylight. "What the hell have you been feeding them? They're huge," Luther asked. "They have been bred specifically for their unusually large size and hyper-aggressiveness," Quion replied. "Wonderful. Wouldn't have it any other way," Plato deadpanned. "So, are there any stipulations to this?" "No one may assist you while you're in the pit, the only exception being the lowering and retrieval of your person from the pit. The only thing you may take into the pit is a single blade. Do you understand?" Quion asked. Plato nodded. Plato stripped his shirt off and made his way over to the staging area. "Hey, brother, take this," Luther said, and produced his marine K-bar knife for use in the pit. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll stick with this," Plato replied, and pulled from its sheath a Sykes Fairbairn stiletto dagger, favored by the Special Air Service for its efficiency at dispatching enemy foes in close-quarter combat. Plato hoped its long, double-edged design would aid him in this test. Gripping the rope with one hand and the dagger in the other, Plato prepared to be lowered. Taking one final look down, he steeled himself against the terrifying idea that he would soon be facing the white behemoths up close and personal. Steadying himself near the edge, he was nearly knocked off his feet by Bion, who raced to his side, tears pouring down her face, her body racked with sobs. Hey, be brave, and for once have some faith in me," Plato said soothingly. "I'm so scared," Bion replied. "I know, but look at it like this. I've never failed you yet," Plato said with a forced grin. Despite herself, she forced a smile back. "Then I forbid you to fail me now," Bion said. Plato gently pushed her away, and Luther took hold of her. "See you soon, brother," Luther said. Plato nodded. Luther, Nat, and Huyn lowered Plato into the pit. The crocodiles so far hadn't taken any notice of him, yet they could be seen floating on the far side. As soon as his feet touched water, Plato dived into the black water, and for several long seconds he disappeared from sight. The moment he hit the water, the result was instantaneous. All 3 crocodiles froze and turned towards the new sound. Moments later, they too disappeared from sight. "Oh my God, they've seen him," Bion whispered. Luther had no words of comfort as he watched helplessly. The heads of the three crocodiles appeared near where Plato had landed in the water, and for some reason, he still hadn't resurfaced. Their reptilian eyes scanned for any source of movement. Plato's team watched for any signs of their teammate. "Look over there!" Huyn exclaimed and pointed to the far side of the pit where Plato had emerged with minimal noise and fuss. Despite his stealthy movements, the crocodile's excellent hearing picked up on their new prey. They all turned and flew off after him, their desire to be the first to eat being the sole driving force behind their eager movements. Realizing that time was precious, Plato turned towards the pontoon and swam quite literally for his life. The smallest of the three crocodiles was the first to arrive at Plato's last known location. Their eagerness for food compelled competition between the beasts. Plato now knew that trying to outswim them was futile, so instead, he turned towards the first and smallest of the three and simply waited for it to approach. "What the hell is he doing?" Luther muttered as he and the others watched helplessly from the edge. "Plato, look out!" Bion screamed. Plato shut her and everything else out as he stared at the oncoming albino. "He's given up," one of the warrior women said out loud. Luther gave her a glare that could have burned through steel. "You don't know my friend very well," Luther hissed. Indeed, furious at this entire situation they were all faced with, Plato was still treading water and staring at what seemed certain death. Sensing a much weaker prey, the crocodile increased its speed and shot at the floating form of Plato, its jaws opening in anticipation of first blood. Plato turned his shoulder side on at the last minute, narrowly avoiding what would have been a fatal blow. At the same time, he brought the tip of his dagger up and under the jaw of the giant reptile, while simultaneously throwing his other arm over the top of the beast's mouth and gripping on with all his might. The momentum carried them both further along, the crocodile's knife wound not having registered yet, as Plato fought to hold on while his adversary started to spin and take him into a death roll. Plato's world lost all sense as he was whipped savagely around in the murky water. Unable to see, he did the only thing he could, and that was to continue to stab at the beast from underneath its throat, being possibly one of the only vulnerable spots on it. After what seemed an eternity, Plato swore that the crocodile's thrashings were getting weaker. Attempting to gain an advantage, Plato wrapped his legs around the creature's head and tried to pull himself around, with the goal of being on top. This was much harder than he thought, for, although the crocodile was indeed growing weaker, it was still 10 times stronger than any human, and Plato's air was starting to run out. His perseverance was either paying off, or the wounds he had been able to inflict were more substantial than he thought, as the water around was now filled with the beast's blood. Plato was now positioned atop the crocodile, his face directly above the beast's eyes. He knew that just about every animal alive had one weakness, and the crocodile, though physically impressive, still could be vulnerable. He knew time was not on his side, and without overthinking his situation, he plunged his dagger into the crocodile's eye socket and straight into the brain. The effect was immediate. The crocodile bucked hard, throwing Plato high into the air and back into the water. The crocodile fell still and sank beneath the water, dead. Plato was caught off guard as he re-entered the water. Because of the mud and blood, he hardly knew which way was up. His lungs screamed for air. Trying to calm himself, it was pure chance that he noticed the bubbles around him and the direction in which they traveled. He attempted to follow them. "Where is he?" Bion cried out. They had all lost sight of him once he had splashed back into the water. "Fuck this!" Luther yelled, as he made an attempt to jump in after his friend. It was only the intervention of Nat and Huyn, not the warriors who were about to shoot him, that halted the big Marine's attempt. "Get off me, damn it!" Luther roared as he fought against his teammates. "Hold still, you'll get us all killed," Huyn grunted. Bian, whose eyes remained fixed to the water, watched anxiously for any sign of movement. Then Plato burst forth from the gloomy water in an eruption of frothy muck, his lungs gasping for oxygen. The warrior women burst out into applause and cheering in support of Plato's efforts. The others looked about in confusion. "It's like they want him to succeed," Bian whispered. Even Luther had quit his struggles as he watched his friend. "We are all impressed with his heroism, despite this situation. I don't want to see him die," Quian said over Bian's shoulder, who then glanced back incredulously. "Then put an end to this now," Bian fumed. "This is all preordained. Only the gods may intervene, as we are only cogs in their great work," Quian replied, although her expression was one of regret. Plato had survived the onslaught of one of the crocodiles, but he was unable to waste time on self-congratulation, as there were still 2 other beasts craving his demise. After quickly reorienting himself, Plato made a beeline for the pontoon, now only 10 meters away, whether it was because of the struggle or the blood and gore in the water. The other 2 crocodiles were nowhere to be seen. Now, with the pontoon nearly in reach, Plato was actually starting to think that he might pull this test off when something hard struck him from the side. One of the crocodiles, either playing with its food or testing his mettle, had swung its tail into him like a huge leathery club. The blow delivered had 2 unexpected results, the first being that it lifted Plato out from the water and onto the pontoon. The second, it had rendered him unconscious. Lying on the stone pontoon, Plato had been knocked cold and remained unmoving, his dagger lying meters away, its blade glittering under the dim light. "Oh God, he's dead!" Bian panicked. She was on the verge of hysteria. No, he's not. I can see him breathing. "Plato, get your arse up and get that egg!" Luther cried out. The rest of the team started to yell for him to get up too. Eventually, even the warrior women were chanting, "Get up!" Plato stirred and felt consciousness, his eyes still closed. He tried to move, but the effort felt impossible. Not even sure of where he was, he felt as if he was in a bubble that was preventing any sensory ability. He tried again to move. Nothing. The 2 remaining crocodiles were swimming slowly around the concrete pontoon. They could see Plato lying immobile, but because of the pontoon's height, they weren't able to climb aboard. Not that this was stopping them from trying. In fact, several attempts very nearly had the larger of the 2 succeed. Plato was still blissfully unaware of how close he was to courting death as he struggled to rouse himself from his dream-like state. The entire room was thunderous in support of Plato, the warriors' cheers attempting to urge him on to victory. Plato was starting to come to, although he was far from battle-ready. The roar from the crowd was like a distant noise, which seemed unimportant to him. He opened his eyes and the room swam, making him feel nauseous. In fact, unaware, he vomited where he lay. The effort of moving still felt impossible. The smaller of the 2 crocodiles was now doubling its efforts to board the pontoon, each time getting closer and closer to succeeding. "I don't think he can get up," Nat cursed, as they watched in frustration. Bian again pleaded with Quian for mercy, but the warrior woman only shook her head. "I thought you SAS cats were supposed to be tough." "Bullshit. If it were me, I would have been done already and eating a gator steak by now," Luther yelled, trying to elicit anything from his colleague. Plato heard Luther's voice, although the words were unintelligible. He held on to them as if they were a bridge for him to cross. He tried again to open his eye. This time he saw light, like the far end of a tunnel. He rubbed his eyes in the hope they would clear. Rolling onto his side, he attempted to sit up and was partly successful. The smaller crocodile was getting closer towards its goal of boarding the pontoon. Each time it managed to reach a little higher. With the human nearly in its grasp, it continued to jump. Plato was now sitting up, and the tunnel vision effect nearly gone. He was still having trouble with his gross motor skills. The effort of standing seeming near impossible. The crocodile had ducked below the water, to the very bottom of the pit where it lay for a few seconds, as if it were psyching itself for another attempt. It pushed off and slashed its mighty tail like a propeller, launching itself out of the water, speed and momentum sending it onto the side of the pontoon. With only its head and two front limbs, it started to slowly wiggle and crawl, its giant body edging up onto the pontoon's flat surface. Plato's vision and nausea were now gone, but he was still far from 100%. He looked on in dawning horror as the albino crocodile gained leverage, hungry eyes remaining locked onto its prize. Plato looked around wildly, hoping there was something within reach that might be of use. Then he saw it, 6 feet away, his dagger glittering like a jewel. He dropped onto his belly and proceeded to crawl, the effort and the speed of which were akin to moving through jello. He glanced to the side and saw that the crocodile was nearly completely up, its jaws smashing together in a frenzy. Plato doubled his efforts, the dagger only a couple of feet away. Everyone on the edge of the pit had now grown silent, sensing this could very well be the end of the Englishman. The next few seconds would tell either way. The back feet of the crocodile managed to connect with concrete, and with a heaving lurch, it scuttled completely onto the flat deck. It was at that moment that it turned its full attention on Plato at the very time his fingers grasped the ribbed handle of the stiletto blade. Like a freight train, it bore down on Plato, its mouth open, exposing dozens of razor-sharp teeth. Near exhausted, Plato rolled over in time to see the oncoming crocodile, mouth open in attack. He raised his knife hand in an almost futile gesture against the reptile juggernaut and watched in horror as his hand disappeared into the mouth of the beast. Everyone atop the pit gasped as they realized Plato's luck had just run out. Still grasping the dagger, Plato's arm was now completely in the mouth of the beast, and as it proceeded to bite down, the tip of the blade ruptured the epiglottis, located at the back of the reptile's throat. Its first instinct was to recoil away from Plato and the sudden pain the human had inflicted. The pontoon was only so big, and as it retreated, it slipped and fell back into the water. With the damage to its throat, the beast started to drown, as water now filled its lungs. Frantically twisting, but to no avail, it sank to the bottom and died, only a few bubbles surfacing from where it had once been. Another cheer erupted from the crowd as Plato rolled onto his back, gasping from the exertion of the second battle. He now had time to regain his wit and strength. "What a man," Quion breathed. "He is truly blessed by the gods. I hope that his luck holds out to the end." It took Plato a good 10 minutes before he was able to get to his feet, and another 5 before he was able to make his way towards the intended trophy, the black egg. With it now in his possession, he moved to the edge of the pontoon and watched with a morbid fascination as the third and last crocodile continued to circle, its gaze never leaving him. "What now?" Luther yelled out. Plato watched the circling croc and knew there was but one way out. "Have the rope ready. I'm going to have to swim for it." Plato replied. You can't. It's suicide. You're too tired, Bion called out. Plato ignored her. Just be ready, Plato said to Luther, who nodded back. He knew he only had one chance at this. The crocodile was relentless, but it was circling all the way around. Plato had to time it just right, so when the beast was at the furthest point, he would enter the water. Luther, Nhat, and Huin had the rope ready, a makeshift loop waiting to snare Plato's hand. They knew his strength might not be up to the strain of holding on, so as soon as they pulled on it, the loop should do the rest. Ready when you are, Luther signaled. Plato stood at the center of the pontoon and watched as the crocodile circled. Whether it was the fatigue, dulled senses, or fear of failure, he waited and watched. A mantra in his head screamed over and over, "Go, go, go, go!" The crocodile was precisely at the furthest point. Later, on reflection, he wasn't sure what had prompted him to finally move, but he found himself running for the edge, every muscle pumped with adrenaline. At the very last moment, with one foot on the edge, he leapt out hands first. Graceful and in perfect form, he cut through the surface of the water like a knife. The crocodile could hear the splash of its intended victim, and it too disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Plato was the first to surface, his arms and feet working in perfect unison as he was propelled through the water. Seconds and 20 meters back, the remaining crocodile also resurfaced, although its movements were faster and far more efficient. Not wasting time on looking back at his pursuer, Plato literally swam for his life. He was less than 10 meters from the side of the pit, but the crocodile was closing in. "Come on, move it!" Bion screamed. Luther, Huin, and Nhat were ready on the rope as it dangled in wait. Plato was now a few feet away when the crocodile, still moving closer, disappeared beneath the water. "Hurry!" Bion screamed as Plato's hand latched onto the rope. "Now!" Bion screamed again, and the three men pulled with all of their might, hauling Plato out of the water and up the side of the pit. His body was like a rag doll as it was hoisted up. An explosion of water erupted from below Plato's feet as the crocodile leapt after him. Open jaws clamped down, narrowly missing his feet. The albino behemoth dropped like a stone back into the water its prey escaped. Bion stood terrified by the edge of the pit, watching helplessly as the three men worked frantically on the rope. Then a hand appeared, and then another, until finally Plato's face appeared over the lip of the pit's edge. Bion scrambled forward and frantically helped to pull the Englishman up. His energy nearly gone, all Plato could do was hang helplessly as his friends pulled him from the jaws of death, his limp body offering no resistance to their efforts. As they laid him carefully down, another cheer rang out in the confines of the room to almost deafening proportions. "Wait!" Quion ordered, and her warriors fell silent. "Has he got it?" Plato's hand flopped down to his side and towards the large pocket of his tactical pants. After an awkward few seconds, he withdrew it and held it aloft for all to see. In his grasp, the black-shaped egg signified his victory over the first challenge. With their first test completed, Quion ordered refreshments brought out for Plato and the others. It was as if they had proven themselves to be honorable opponents and worthy of being treated as near equals. Plato was still far from whole, but at least he had lost that unhealthy pallor to his skin. Bion asked for and received some medical provisions, and with her training, she was able to tend to the many wounds he had received during his ordeal. "Apart from a concussion and a few stitches, you're fine," Bion said, her tone turning professional. "That's wonderful to know," Plato replied with a forced grin. He currently looked as if he had been involved in a car accident, sporting a black eye, broken nose, and numerous cuts and bruises. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to belittle your pain," Bian responded by squeezing his arm, which caused him to wince. "Oh my God, I'm sorry. That's the arm the crocodile nearly bit off." Plato shook his head to alleviate her worry. "I'm fine. It only hurts when I laugh," Plato muttered. "I'm glad you pulled through," Luther commented. "Don't thank me yet. You have to perform next. I shudder to think what other horrors they have dreamed up for you," Plato said. "I'm trying not to think about it," Luther replied ruefully. They were given an hour for Plato to recover and Luther to gather his wits before they moved into another room. As much as Plato was glad to be leaving, fear of the unknown gripped him. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quills books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.